couple of years ago, I'd gotten to the point where in technical terms, I was indeed fat. I was 118 kilos, and since then I've dropped 25 kilos, and most importantly, I've kept it off. So I want to tell you this story and give you some insight into how you can do the exact same. But before we get into the how, I want to kind of tell you a little bit of backstory, set the scene of how I actually got there in the first place. You see, I was playing rugby at a decently high level, and in my head, I just thought I need to be heavier. I need to be heavier and heavier and heavier. So every single week, I'd be putting away 5,000, 5,500 calories on a daily basis to get my body weight all the way up to 118 kilos. Was it healthy? Probably not. Was it good for me? Almost definitely not. But was it good for rugby? Yes, it made me quite good. So I'm definitely not saying I'm regretting this whole process of getting to that weight. But what it's made me realize is how good you feel when you're on the other side of things and when you do actually drop that weight and get into good shape. And so let me take you back to when I actually got injured. My rugby career was put on pause. I got a bad neck injury, but I was still sitting at 118 kilos, and it took me a good few months to realize that I actually need to get it off. There was absolutely no need to be that heavy anymore, so I needed to pull off that body weight. And the point I realized was actually when I came back from Loughborough, came back home, realized, stood around my mates, that was about 2 times the weight of the vast majority of them. And that was the point where I realized I need to make a change. And it wasn't overly easy to start off with. I actually failed a little bit right at the start because I was so used to just putting away food, having the mindset of needing to eat and eat and eat. It was actually pretty difficult to transition towards dieting. But I finally got it to click. I managed to lose that 25 kilos. And here is how I did it. The first step was actually not trying to do every single thing at once. The main point that started driving weight loss and got me losing a kilo, 2 kilos a week was purely just calorie awareness. Previously, I'd look at a food and if it didn't have 1,000 calories within that meal, I'd almost turn away from it and want more. Once I made the change, I was much more aware of the exact calories that I was putting into my body, taking a look at each individual food rather than just the meal as a whole, and trying to make sure that I was hitting that calorie target that I'd set for myself. So yeah, initially, really all I did was starting being aware of calories. I set myself a calorie target of 2,900, which might sound quite high, but for being 118 kilos and 6'6", had me losing a lot of weight. Like I say, 1 to 2 kilos per week, which was absolutely fantastic. I'd say an initial mistake that I did make was trying to do too much cardio. I already had rugby going on. Even though I'd stopped playing, I was still training 5-6 times a week. So there wasn't really any need for the extra cardio that I was doing on top. That just made me feel really low energy and pushed me a little bit too far right out of the gate. So the lesson from that first step is just start simple. Set yourself a calorie target, start being more aware of your calorie intake, and you'll start making really good progress out of the gate. So then the second point that I think helped me out massively was not just having a nutritional plan, but also having a nutritional strategy. Rather than just having a target of a number that I needed to hit, I was making sure I had some sort of strategy for every single social event, every single social occasion, meal out, etc., so that I could still hit those numbers. What would I do if I got really hungry? What would I do if I was going out, like I say? All of those things needed a strategy behind them to make sure I could stick to these targets really consistently. I handled hunger much better by increasing my water intake, increasing the amount of fiber that I was having, and also increasing the volume of my foods. Rather than choosing pasta with loads of oil on like I used to when I was bulking, I'd make sure I'd choose potatoes or lettuce, something that was really going to bulk out my meals without adding loads of unnecessary calories. And then for social events, all I did was make sure I was banking some calories. If I knew I was going out and having a curry, it was going to be 1,500, maybe up to 2,000 calories. So earlier on in the day, I just pulled back my food a little bit to make sure that that meal out could fit into my calorie targets very easily. So the big thing there and the lesson from the nutritional strategy was just to actually have a plan for every single occasion. Rather than just having a number, you need strategy for each occasion so that you can stay on track. I think the next big point that kind of led to my success was my training approach as well. I didn't do the classic thing of going to a diet, start doing really high reps, start doing HIIT cardio and all of these things that I see all of the time. The first point of call was to redial in my training, my resistance training, still have the focus of growing muscle and getting stronger. There's absolutely no need to try to change up your training just to burn more calories in your session. The whole point of my training sessions and what I'd recommend to you as well is to build muscle. So whether you're 30, 40, 50, 60 kilos overweight, have your training sessions with the goal of building muscle. And it's going to massively help you, A, throughout the diet, because you're going to have more muscle and therefore you're going to burn more calories. And also B, when you finish the diet, you're actually going to look good. You're going to have a decent amount of muscle to actually show. I'd say the biggest two lessons then from training throughout this fat loss is number one, train for muscle growth, like I say. Then number two, make sure that I'm being aware of the changes throughout this process. Your training will feel different when you go from your starting point to 20 kilos less. You're going to be a little bit less stable. You're going to find it a little bit harder to recover because you're eating less. So things might need to change a little bit within your training program to allow for the less stability and also to allow for the less recovery capabilities that you've got. So as I went through the process, my volume changed. The amount of sets that I was doing reduced slightly. And then from a stability perspective, I started leaning towards some more machine-based work that was a little bit less fatiguing and also much more stable so that I could continue to progress from a strength perspective and again, continue to build muscle. The next point that I think is really important is lifestyle habits that I tried to implement throughout the process and that I think you can too. Things like steps, routine, sleep, support systems were all really key because that's what allows you to stick to the process and also have daily non-negotiables so that you feel like you're just winning constantly. If you can get wins on a daily basis, it's going to make the process so much more enjoyable. You're going to continue to feel motivated throughout. So I made sure I had a sleep target, making sure I was getting at least 7 hours a night. I made sure I was hitting at least 8,000 steps a day, which for me was slightly above my normal average outside of cardio. And then from a routine perspective, I just made sure that I actually used a calendar. It sounds really simple, but just put your training into your calendar, put your steps into your calendar, put your cardio into your calendar, put when you're going to be having your meals into your calendar. And it's going to make the process so much more easy because all you have to do is follow that preset schedule. So the lesson from this one is the boring stuff matters. It makes a huge difference, whether it's steps or sleep. It all makes a massive difference, not only in how much fat you're actually going to lose, but also the motivation and how much you're going to enjoy the process. So make sure you've got those tick boxes, the daily non-negotiables in there to get you through this. Now, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't all smooth sailing. I had a couple of holidays within this whole process that did make it a little bit harder. It made my body weight plateau throughout certain periods throughout the timeline of losing that 25 kilos. So actually my strategy was slightly different to normal. I love holidays and I want to enjoy them to the fullest. I don't really want to have to think about too much around training and nutrition. Sure, you're building habits. You naturally get your protein in. You naturally go and get a little run in or want to go and train. That's just what you build after training for 5, 6, 7 years. In fact, I might be coming on 10 now, but these things naturally build in. So that wasn't too hard. But when I was away, the food side especially, I wanted to enjoy. I want to go have a drink. I want to go be able to enjoy a nice meal with my family, with my friends. So that was a little bit difficult to manage. The thing that I did was just pushed harder outside of my holiday windows. What that meant is, let's say across a 2-month period, if I've got 8 weeks and one of those weeks was on holiday, for the rest of the 7 weeks, I'd push hard for fat loss. And then that 1 week away, I'd just try to maintain. Because for me, for my values, I'd much rather push harder, find it a little bit more difficult within the time that is just normal life. Then when I go away, I can go relax and completely enjoy myself. Now, you can stay in a deficit. You can keep the same training routine when you are away, but personally, that is just not my preference. And so doing all that has helped me lose 25 kilos. And now you're probably wondering, how do you hold on to that? How do you actually maintain the 93 kilos that I did get down to? Now, I'm not going to lie, there's a bit of fluctuation, but I've really maintained that sort of 93 to maybe 98 kilo marker because for me, I like to go through bulks. I like to try to build a little bit more muscle. So how have I actually done that? Well, first of all, the goalpost shifted. Once you finish the diet, you need to make sure you've got something else that you're reaching for. If you don't have that, you'll just sack it all off and you'll probably just go back to eating how you used to. So make sure you've got a new goal in place. For me, that was always building muscle. Back in the day, I was always a skinny kid. I was always really, really thin. And it was only that one time that I got big, I got heavy and potentially got fat. So make sure the goalpost shifts. And like I say, for me, it was always about building muscle so that I could go away, feel good, fill out t-shirts, fill the sleeves. So for me, that was always the goalpost. But for you, it might be something slightly different. The second thing that I think is really important to do is make sure you've got a time after your diet where mentally you're still dieting, but from an intake perspective, you're now just holding at maintenance. So rather than just finishing your diet and from a mindset perspective, completely canning it off, you should probably have somewhere between 4 and 12 weeks, depending on how long your diet actually was, just focusing on maintaining your body weight. The mindset, like I say, needs to stay the same, because the actions you do, the steps, the cardio, the managing meals out, all of that stuff needs to be solidified into a habit so that you can actually maintain the body weight that you're at. So just make sure that you have a phase after you finish dieting for a certain amount of time where you're really going to try and just maintain your body weight. Give it a really good effort. And I'm not going to lie, it could be harder than the diet itself, because you're no longer getting the daily wins of that scale weight coming down, but it's really essential to do. So once the diet is finished, you're not done. Lock in, go again, and really push yourself to be able to maintain that body weight once you've finished. So the lesson here is the goal isn't just losing the weight, it's building a lifestyle that allows you to keep it off. So yeah, that is 25 kilo lost. A couple of takeaways. You don't need extreme diets. You just need a number to hit, and then you need a plan for every social occasion that goes around it. You don't need to do hours and hours of cardio or doing loads of HIIT sessions. You need to focus on building muscle. And then you also don't need to give up your social life. You just need to make sure you've got a plan to manage all of these social occasions as you go through the diet. And then on top of that, you need a structure, you need patience, discipline, and a plan that actually fits your life, like I have built to fit my own. So if you're about to embark on your own fat loss journey, I have been there, I've dropped that 25 kilos, and I'd love to help you out as well. I actually do one-to-one coaching where I help people do this, just like Chris, who actually just lost 50 kilos, which is even more than I did, and it's definitely very impressive. But if you are interested, head to the link below. You can apply for coaching either by dropping me a DM on Instagram or click that application, and I'll be in touch once you've filled that out.